What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Project build series, where I take this Cutlass Cruiser wagon that I found in this dude's backyard that's been collecting dust for a couple of years and start resurrecting this thing. I'm building this car to be my next power tour car. I'm a big fan of wagons, and these cars are super nostalgic to me, so I really wanted to try and build one of these things. I'm all about the unique cars, and this one is definitely going to be one of them. In the last few videos, you guys saw me tear this car apart. I built engine mounts for the 3000 and the F23 5-speed manual, built the exhaust for the turbo to make that thing fit in this car, then built an intake to actually get this thing placed where I wanted it to be. So in this video, I'm finally going to be putting seats in this car, and it is a debacle, but in the end, we finally get the right seats in the car, and I'm pretty happy with the end result. So stay tuned and let's just dive in. Alright guys, so I'm heading off to the junkyard now to try and get some parts for this car. I have a day off, so it's not often I can get out here, so I try to do it when I can. And today I can do it. So I'm going to be trying to get some parts for the car. I'm hoping to get some wheels for it. I'm also going to try and get some seats for it too if I can. Try and find something that looks decent in there. I'm not expecting to find something perfect. It'll be just good enough, hopefully. We'll see what we can find though. We'll take a look and get some ideas for seats for the car, and hopefully I can find something cool. So we'll see you there. I managed to find this car here, but it doesn't have anything I need really. Well, maybe I could grab that marker light actually. But this has a 3.3 in it, which is basically a small 300. I think it's got a shorter deck height, but that's kind of cool. So you can see some of the parts that would have been here otherwise if this car had a 3.8. Some of these actually did have them, but that's locked. The newer cluster has seats, has a split bench, which that's kind of rough. So that's cool. Take a look at this, see if there's any parts I could use on it. Not much really that sticks out for me for this. Power windows. I don't really need anything on the interior, but that's cool. Alright, well, I think I've talked myself into these seats here. There's not much else out here that I'm seeing that I like. And it seems like G6 seats might have the best shot of giving me a lot of legroom in the back seat, maybe. So that could be kind of nice. And plus G6 being a smaller car, more likely to be able to fit in there pretty easily. I would have liked to get leather seats and heated, but like everything I'm buying in the junkyard is just looking pretty rough. This one's not perfect either, but maybe I could sew that together. They don't look bad. I mean, it'd be cool to get a nice modern seat in here. I should sit in them and see how they feel. So, not much on the side here. That's a little disappointing. They do recline nicely, and they have the lumbar support, so that's nice. But there's not much support in this side of the seat. But I do want a newer seat, and there are Malibus here, but I didn't like the way they looked. And they are manual seats, which is, you know, that's not great, but also manual is going to be lightweight at least, so there's that. I think I've talked myself into it. I think I'm going to pull them. I figured, you know, going with black is going to be a nice neutral color. It's blackish, you know, it's not completely black, but it is what it is. Not the worst seats here. You know, even if I do go with another set of G6 seats, I can still at least use the same mounting mechanisms, because I can set up for these seats and then just swap them out later on if I want to. So these look as good as any I've seen, so it's the best ones out there. And with cloth seats, you don't need heated seats anyway, so that should be cool. Nice modern-ish seat with a little lacking lumbar. How many miles are in this car? 207. Oh, that's not great. That's not great. They look okay for 207. Do I hold out, or do I'm gonna check the prices. Just in time. I had to cut the seatbelt off of this one, but I don't think I'll use those in the car. We'll see how these work. I like how modern they look. I just don't like how worn out this one is. But it looks like somebody started to pull them anyway, so maybe relatively they're good. You can see this interesting seat bracket. It hooks in here. slides down this side, so I'll figure something out. Here we go. All right, got this thing home. Got one of the seats in the car situated a little bit. It is a little weird. The fitment is not amazing, and it'll probably come down a little bit somehow, I think. Not a ton of clearance up here, but that's all right. That's not a big deal. The headliner, or the headrest is up a little bit. So if I push it down, it's a little bit better. Seat's a little dirtier than I thought it was, looking at it in this light, but I'm sure I can clean that up. Biggest concern is just this tear here and that support there. That's a typical GM seat thing that happens, but the way I see it, these were $40 each. That's $80 total for these two. And any new seat you find, it's going to cost a ton of money anyway. So this is a good fill or stopgap for now, and it's not bad. It looks pretty good. It's a good looking seat, I think. You know, it looks pretty modern. Looks like it's kind of sporty, a little bit nicer than what came in the car. Just need to make this thing fit in here and find a spot for it. It's going to take some work to make this thing actually fit properly, but I think we can make it happen. So let's going to make some brackets down here for it. You can see we have this little doohickey there. We have to get some sort of hook in here, basically take this stud off, and I'll just cut some grooves in here probably, I think, and just make that thing fit. Maybe weld in some plates, make it a little bit stronger, and then work on that back one too. I'm sure I'll need to find a whole new spot for that and drill something out to make that fit there too. The width is a little wider than I anticipated, and it's a good thing I didn't get a bigger seat, because this seat is, you know, being a G6, you'd think it's smaller. But what I'll do is I'll just clearance a tunnel here for these to make them fit better. It's not going to need that huge of a tunnel anyway, so we'll just trim that thing down. Yeah, it's a little weird, the black on the blue, but I'm here for it, you know. It is what it is. It's a good fit for me, I guess. You know, it's not a great fit for the car, but, you know, like I say, it is what it is. I'll probably pull off that seatbelt on that side. Just, you know, keep retaining the stock, the door seat belts. So that would be kind of cool with the blue and the black. I don't know. That's pretty fancy. I'll figure out the placement for it and make this thing all fit in here nicely. All right, so I'm testing the seat for the passenger side now, and it's not looking good. This tunnel in the this car, the center of the car, is really not centered at all. It goes more to the passenger side for some reason, and because of that, it looks like I'm going to have to cut out a lot of material here on the passenger side. Basically the whole length of the console to make this thing fit in here properly. That's going to mess up the carpet a little bit. It's also going to, you know, really cut down on the amount of space I can use over here, because right now you can see that that seat mount is nowhere near the pedestal. This needs to go over like 2 more inches. So basically 2 inches of this console is going to have to come out. So it's going to have to get cut like right here at this curve, which is not great. That's not good at all. Not happy with that, but the way it's looking with these seats, there's not a lot of options. I'm not thrilled about this. I know this one's gonna have to get cut too. I still haven't done that. I do really like this back pocket these things have, so it gives you some extra legroom back here in the back seat. So I kind of want to hang on to them just for that, and also the driver's seat has that adjustable lumbar, which is really nice too. So I may still run these. It's not. Well, I went to the junkyard this morning. I found the seats that I was looking for. I was looking for them out of like a Chevy Cruze. I was thinking, hey, you know what? This is a small, tiny car. Maybe these seats will work. Turns out every seat that GM has basically has the same track width on them. So where they bolt to the floor, they're about 19.5 inches on every single GM car that I saw there, from like the 2000s to now, basically. So I only have 17 inches on the other side, so I can't really fit any seat that's modern inside of this car without some heavy modification. So that means today that I'm gonna have to do some heavy modification to this car to make this all work. First challenge, obviously, is the track width. This side is not so bad. The other side is much more narrow, where that center hump is more to the passenger side. I'm assuming that this is because of the catalytic converter or something, some sort of option with that, or something to do maybe with the all-wheel drive system that some of these cars had. This platform, not the Cutlasses, the 6000 was the only car that got that. Maybe that's what that's for, but so that's the first challenge. What I'm gonna have to do here is basically get this thing one size on both sides of this thing. And then even on this side, I'm gonna have to trim off this section right here to make this actually fit the seat. The other challenge is that these seat holes. They're all made for studs with Bolton style seats. These seats have this hook bracket, I guess. So the way that this works is that the front of them goes into the floor and then you bolt the back down, and that's how they get held down. This gets clamped in there like that. So I need to make that or replicate that here. This pedestal on this side needs to get cut down a little bit. So the difference in height here on the car these came out of was 3/4 of an inch. This is about, you know, 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches between the height differences here, which will be good because right now these things sit so high in the car. I want to get them down as low as I can within reason. So first things I need to do here is basically trace out where I'm going to cut these things. What I'm going to do is I'll just mark this stuff out, figure out where I'm going to place these cuts at for the easiest way to put this all back together, and then we'll just start cutting and see where we end up. Alright, so I've spent a lot of time just trying to figure out how this is going to get measured, and I think that this is going to be my plan here. I've got my little plastic surgery marks all over this thing. My thought is I'm going to keep this piece right here, this whole bend. I'm just going to take this thing and move it over 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches seem to be the magic number here to make this all clear. What I'll do is I'll make this cut here, basically throw this piece away. So we'll cut this piece out, cut this piece out. I'm not sure how I'm going to do these corners yet. I'll figure that out when I get there, but pretty good chance I do the corners the same way I do this piece. One big challenge of this is this seatbelt mount. This is for the passenger side seatbelt, so this does need to get moved in too if this whole side needs to come in. And then this beam here I'll cut a little bit further short. I figure I'll cut the floor pan where it's flat and it doesn't have these ridges on it. And the floor pan is what's going to get extended further out. I might just use these pieces, I don't know. And then this will get extended out too further as well. This will give me space to cut this thing back and actually do some welding on the floor first with this out of the way, and then go back in with this, whatever this patch panel is, afterwards. So that's the plan. We'll see how this goes. Alright, don't panic guys. I know this is awful looking, but at the end of this it's going to be hopefully looking okay. The biggest thing I didn't anticipate is that there's like 3 different layers here of this frame, so this is going to be tricky. So I'm going to do one layer at a time. Stick with me. Hopefully this thing's going to come out looking okay, and if it doesn't, it's going to be covered by carpet anyway, and the seat will be here anyway, so you're not going to see this at all. I do hate cutting up this floor, but this is the price you pay. We'll see how far we can get, do some welding, and see if we can make this thing look all right. All right, so it's a little sloppy, but it's functional. So I've got the first piece welded in here. This is kind of the structural hump for the interior, at least on the midway here. So there's a couple others. So yeah, so this one is basically done. I don't think that I cut that. I think that that one was cut like that before, but I went ahead and just, you know, evened it out and notched it out there just to give it some more strength, more than I had before. But you know, it's strong enough that I can like stand in the car, not see anything move. All 200 pounds of me is on this, and it's not doing anything. So the structural pieces here, welds are a little sloppy. I'll go in here and clean it up a little bit more, but you know, this is at least showing you that this is kind of how it's going to look, and it's actually looking like I made the interior wider in this side. It's starting to look like it's, you know, intentional. It doesn't look like this weird hacked up thing yet. It will probably, but once again, you're not going to see it. Next thing I want to do here is start on some of these next pieces. So there's a lower layer here to work on, and then there's an upper layer still too. I think that that's the piece right there I'll put on here. It's not going to be clean, but it's probably gonna work. All right, so this one's had a bit of a maiming going on with it, but so that's kind of how that's going to be. I think that this side I'm going to cut here and then let this thing bend inwards probably, and that'll even out that hole, keep that seatbelt mount right there where it should be. So hopefully that goes pretty smoothly. You can see here that this really is the floor in some places, even though it is the second skin or the middle skin. It's really the full skin down here, and then you can see we add another one as we get further up here. So the seatbelt does get bolted to this, so it's important that this thing stays structurally sound. Right, so I'll go ahead and see if I can burn this thing in and make that work. All right, so I'm doing a test fit of the seat because I realized that my 20-inch measurement was measured up at the top pedestal, but the bottom pedestal, if I keep it at the current height, I'm gonna have to measure it from about here instead of up there. So it looks like I lose like an inch or so by doing that, which is not great because that means I need to recut all of this. But I think what I've decided is, or realized, is that I can place this thing further over and just raise the whole thing up, and it's not too low. Well, it's not too high at least. So I think that could work. But otherwise though, I sat in it. It seems like it's not in a bad spot. So I think that this could work. I'll just have to make sure I'm very careful with how I close this off here and just keep that clearance nice and tight. I think I still need to clear off this side a little bit, but otherwise though, I think that this could work. I still have a lot of work to do in this, so it's a project for sure. It's a project and a half, really. It's way more than I thought it'd be, but it's still doable. It's just gonna take a little bit longer than I thought. All right, so I've got a lot of the base skin done here so far. I still need to work out the front half of it. I'm not sure how I'm gonna transition this from going from this wide section down to, you know, this very narrow section yet, but I'll probably end up cutting this thing somewhere along here and then just bending this thing over. But you know, it's looking like a car again somewhat. It's kind of trippy to see two levels of this little hump here, but soon it'll be just one level here. I've decided to do full welding around the whole thing. It's not pretty. It's very thin sheet metal. I don't have a TIG welder, so it is what it is. And once again, I'm not the best welder in the world. I'm adequate at best. So because there's so many different layers of this floor, you know, we have this base frame, we have this base layer, we have this support beam here, we have the outer skin here up top too. I can't just, you know, start putting some sort of silicone in here or something like that to really seal this up perfectly, because it's just going to melt or catch fire when I start welding the next layer. So I need to make sure I basically weld this thing completely, every single stitch. So that makes this all tricky. And then in the end, I can try and seal this up somewhat, but the way this outer skin sits here, it's going to be difficult. So it's coming along, at least on this first layer. You know, we're making progress. Okay, I present to you guys the two-faced tunnel. This side, pristine. This side, destroyed, mangled, welded back together. It's not my best or worst work, but you know, I'm happy with it. It looks like some stuff you'd see in like a Iron Man's original, you know, welded together body that he had. So this is mostly done, at least as far as the first skin goes. I have pretty much full welding on everything for the most part. So I think I'm pretty safe as far as fumes go. I still need to fill in some of these holes for like the rivets, but that'll be something I can do once I get the second layer on there, and I'll use that to kind of hold that on. So I did have to use some patch panels and some pretty odd looking pieces to make this all work. Use a lot of construction paper to get my cutouts. People usually use like a cardboard for that sort of thing, but I decided to use construction paper just because I had some, and it actually works out really well. One of the best things about the construction paper actually is if you're doing this and you're trying to get like a corner or something like that, you can take your construction paper and just like push it down on that, and then you get this nice little imprint of like that corner, and then you can use that to cut that out so much easier. So I found that this was a lot better than cardboard for this case, at least. So this is coming together, so I'm going to call it a night here. Tomorrow I'll work on getting the second skin here and this little hump onto, and somehow make sure that this is still 20 inches wide here or so for the seat, because it is still quite a bit of a stretch to make this all work. So it's going to be tight even with all this. And then on this side, I still need to cut this off too and make this all flush. And then once that's all done, I can work in the shifter, mount that up, and get that thing sorted out somewhere, wherever that's going to sit up there. Still a lot of work to be done, but it's starting to look like a thing now. We'll see how far we get next time, and we'll just keep digging into this. All right, it is the next day. I'm working on some of the rest of this stuff here, trying to get the next layers done. I ran out of my CO2 argon mix, so I'm welding using Trimix now, and it's a little tricky, but it seems to be working. I've noticed that the puddle doesn't actually like puddle as much anymore. It kind of sticks up. I'm not a welder, guys. I'm just a do-it-yourselfer, but I've learned that so far, so I've had to crank it up a little bit in terms of voltage, and it seems to be doing all right. Working on this center hump, there's a structural layer in between here that I'm trying to sort out, and based off of the width of the seat, I had to cut this thing short here to try and make this all fit. And what I'll do is I'll just brace this up with like a thicker piece of sheet metal or steel to kind of bridge that gap there between these things, because I took out quite a bit of it. It would have gone another inch or so this way, and can't quite have that here with the width that I have to work with, so I'm just not gonna have that there. But I do need to extend this one out here, so I built this little plate and kind of massage it to fit in this little section, and I think it's gonna work out all right. It will stick up a little bit further than you'd expect here for the original, but overall though, I think it's going to be okay. The seats are going to be even higher than this thing anyway, so it's not a big deal. The seats are going to be about the height of this back panel right here, so it'll be a little bit higher than this spot, but I think this is probably pretty close to it. Any rate though, I think it's going to be okay, because the front of the seat is going to be 3/4 of an inch higher than the back, so as it goes from the back side, even if this is pretty close in height, it's going to ramp up a little bit as it gets closer to the front, so I think it should be okay. And if not, we can always just hit it with the good old engineering hammer to make this thing work out. So this is the plate that's going to go on top of this, and I think that this will be fine. So this is going to give me still clearance enough to go weld that plate in afterwards. So I'm going to keep on keeping on with this and try and get some of this done, and then just keep welding this thing shut. All right, so I've got my laser in here just trying to figure out how much of this floor I need to cut out still for the seat. I've pretty much figured out that this is where it's going to be, and there is some structure that needs to come out of this thing still, it looks like, so I need to go through and just cut up some more of this. I knew I would have to do it for this top piece, but we'll see how far it ends up being on the bottom there of that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start cutting this thing up and see where this ends up landing, and see if I can make this thing look somewhat decent here, and at least be structurally sound. This thing is crazy strong now as it is, so it's way better than it was. So the floor is basically all done. You know, as far as the structural parts go, there is one piece missing still that I need to sort out here still. So it is a full-on floor now. All the different layers are on top of it, so it's basically settled in. It feels strong. It doesn't look terrible, so it almost looks like it was intentional. But you know, it's good enough for what I was going for. I didn't need to go ahead and just clean up all these welds. Welding with the Trimix is a different experience than doing the simple argon mix, so that was a big learning curve, and I've had a lot of weld puddles that just would not flow down at all, so some of this had to get grinded out pretty good. Went ahead and just grinded that whole thing down, and now we have a somewhat smooth-ish floor, so it's good enough for this job, and we'll just keep moving on to the next part of this project. Okay, so I have both of these done and patched up and braced up here, added some little support beams in there. These probably weren't really necessary, but it was more just a making it look clean, and also if it is necessary, it's there to kind of tie out everything together. So it kind of ties that top layer as well as like the other brace layer too. This side's done too ish for now, so that's all squared away. It's interesting how much I had to cut out of this side versus this side to get 20 inches of space here on either side. This really just illustrates the point about how much more space is on the driver's side of the car than on the passenger side of the car, that the tunnel is not even centered, and I still only had to cut out this much out of this side to make it equal this side. Progress is happening. Now the next thing I need to do is go ahead and make these seat brackets for it. You can see there's only 2 on each side. They're on the outside of the seats, and this just had a bench seat before, so there was no reason to have a pedestal in the middle. So I'm gonna have to make pedestals for the front and the rear, and I might even have to like make new rear ones too. And in fact, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to do that because of the different spacing and because of the different seat design here. So this is all gonna have to be redone and done differently. I know I'm gonna need to raise the rears of this a little bit because of just the way this clearance is around that hump there. So I need to get all the space there that I can, so I need to go all the way to the edge of that little track area there. So I need to figure out if I need to space the fronts of these even higher too as well, and I'm sure I will need to do it a little bit, but I need to know how much now. So I'll go ahead and just measure the height difference here on this pedestal here. This is kind of the height of where the rear is going to be. This is coming out to about 3 7/8 of an inch or so, and then up here looks like we're about 3 1/8, really? 3 7/8, really? So 3 7/8, 3 1/8, dude, there's no way. Okay, so I guess I won't need to do anything at all for the fronts. So I'll make a new pedestal for the rear, and then the fronts will be basically the same height that they're at. Now I will need to cut this thing down and take that out of there because these things have like a little hook that they use to go ahead and mount that way. So I'll need to make that same sort of attachment on these things, which means making that flat, and then somehow I think what I'll do is I'll drill 2 holes and then use an angle grinder or a jigsaw to cut out that piece for that. So that'll work out over there, and then I'll just need to make another one on the inside of both sides of this. So this is going to be quite the project. So let's go ahead and just bite the bullet and get this done. I'm working on building some pedestals for the seats, and I'm gonna have to make basically 3 pedestals per seat. So to do this, I'm gonna make some templates for each of the different mounting brackets that are on these seats. We have like this hook style thing here with 2 hooks on each side. Then down here we have a bolt hole and also like a dowel type of pin there. And it looks like the seats probably bolt onto the floor on this surface right here. So this doesn't actually touch the floor itself. They stop right here in this. So I'll need to make a hole for the centering pin, and then also a hole for the bolt hole here too as well. And the way that these things bolt down is that the nut is actually part of the floor or part of the pedestal. So I'll need to like weld something there for that too. I think that the mounting surfaces, I'll use something kind of thick just because I have it, and it's not going to be a big dent in the amount of weight that the car takes on. So I'll use some 1/8 inch sheet metal for that and go ahead and make these things up here. So I'll go ahead and measure up these things now too to figure out what that's going to look like. So I need to make 2 of these. And then from there we can kind of figure out how it's going to all get placed, what the height of it's all going to be, and what the material is we'll cut it out of. Alright, so this is taking way longer than expected, but I'm making progress at least. I've got the rear mounts basically done, at least as far as like the actual mounting surface goes. I still need to make like a full-on pedestal for it, but the fronts are taking a lot longer than expected. So my plan here was to drill a hole through each of these and then just kind of merge the gap here with them. I'm thinking it might be an angle grinder with a tiny cutoff wheel. Find like a used one that's like barely alive, like that one right there, and then that'll be able to cut through that probably. And then just go back through there, hopefully with a die grinder bit that's small enough. So that would be the plan for that. Ideally, this would be something you get laser cut somewhere, but I don't have time for that. And that sounds expensive. So instead, I'll just destroy like 20 drill bits doing this process. Soon I'll have at least the mounting surfaces, and I can just kind of put them on the seats. I will locate the fronts. I'll get the seats in the front, then bolt on these back pedestals to the seats themselves, get them placed in the car where they should be, then just burn the whole thing in with like some pedestals of some sort, and just kind of figure it out from there and just kind of guesstimate where it's going to be. Whatever I don't finish tonight is not getting done this week, so that sucks. But we'll keep going at this thing and see if we can get somewhere, make something happen. All right, so I've got the brackets done, at least the top surfaces. That's about it so far. And I've got the ones that are going to go into the car, the new ones, and they're looking all right. I think this is how it's going to work out here. I'm a little worried about all this extra space here on these things. There isn't any way that this can actually like not hook all the way. And I know the car it came out of, the sheet metal there is very thin. And unless they're doing some sort of wizardry with some sort of like rubber or something like that, these things just sit in the car and they don't get bolted down at all or anything. So I think it just relies on the tension that this provides down here. So this little bolt hole is just gonna pry this thing and do something like that, you know, and keep this surface taut. Because if this goes tight, then there's no issue. It'll stay tight. Yeah, so I think that will be okay. The seat itself is angled, but the brackets are not, so it's prying against itself. I think that's how that works. So yeah, we'll see once we get this in the car and sort this stuff out. And if there's an issue, worst case scenario, I go back in and I throw some like rubber pads in here to keep this thing from rattling in the car. The mystery is still, how am I going to get this thing in here? I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure how I'm going to get this thing set right at all yet. So that's a mystery to be solved. And then once I get that in there, I'm going to have to like come in here and sneak in here and somehow weld something small on this thing, and then maybe get both sides of it, or maybe just get like the front and the back and tack it in and then fully weld it later. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's going to be fun. It's going to be tricky. It's going to suck. Same thing with the bottoms still. These have a little bit more room since we don't have, you know, all this going on here with them, but still not the most ideal situation. But it's a tight fit. We're going to make it work. It's going to be awesome. All right, so it's a little crude, but it's going to work. It's going to mount the seats in here and place them and locate them. All right, so here's an initial test fit of the driver's side. I think I've got an idea of where it wants to sit here. My goal right now is just to figure out where I'm going to drill these holes to put down this side of it. The struggle is just making sure that it can fit underneath all that. As you can see here, there's a bit of a ledge there, and I don't want it to go too deep. Worst case scenario, I can cut off some of that, but ideally, we don't want to do that. This side looks pretty good too, so it is tight, but it's going to fit. But we'll sort out where the front of this goes, and then we'll worry about the back of it. The big question was, how far from the door could it be? And I think that's the answer right there. Actually, good question is that going to be a problem? Let's find out. Okay, good news. The door closes with the seat where it's at. We are clear to proceed. I think this is going to work out. It'll be tight, but it's going to work. Now, I know what you're thinking. They don't match. That's all right. You know, I'm just not concerned about it right now. So I know these things don't match. This just is what it is. It's going to be impossible to find a seat that actually matches this interior without putting that one back together somehow. It's just, that one is destroyed. It's broken. It has no adjustment at all. It's just not a good seat, you know. We've gone too far. There's no going back. So they fit. They seem to fit all right. I need to adjust the passenger side a little bit. I think it needs to come over still quite a bit. It is rubbing the inside of it on this side, but there's still more room here to bring it over a little bit, and I think that should be good. There's still some space between them. I'll do something else about those seat belts, do that differently, but you know, otherwise it's looking good. I think once these get leveled out, we're going to be golden. Finally have this part of the list crossed off, and this is a big one. This was a big concern. It took longer than I thought it would, but we're getting there. So the biggest issue I'm seeing right now, though, is that this shifter location is not very, it's not good. I'm really reaching for it if I'm putting it up here, and really it's going to be more like right there. So it's going to be quite a reach to actually get in like first, third, and fifth. Like, I've got to lean forward to get to them. Ideally, I could get this thing back here. That would be perfect. I could get a few more inches out of this thing, and it would feel so much more natural if I could put it right here. But I don't think I'm going to be able to do that with the shifter cables I have. The shifter cables on these things are a debacle. It's a nightmare. So the stock ones are very hard to find, you can never find them unless you pull them from a junkyard, and finding longer ones just sounds like a nightmare. So I don't think that that's a possibility. But I think I can pull this further backwards still. There's some zip ties holding it where it's at right now because of that grommet. What I'll probably end up doing is cutting the grommet, making my own, and then pulling this whole thing back. That's gonna do it for tonight though. We're gonna kick back off in this thing in a couple days after I get back from work, and we'll see how far we get into the project. All right, so I've got the front mounts on, basically sort of settled in here. They're not completely welded in. I still need to go ahead and put some braces here on each side of it, but otherwise though, they're not really going anywhere. They're on here pretty good, and I think that that's gonna work out fairly well. It took a lot of measuring, a lot of cutting, a lot of grinding to figure out where they're gonna sit, but I think this is where it's gonna be, and I think it's gonna work out fairly well. The next up here is to put the seats in here, test fit them, and if I need to use a die grinder in these things to make them fit a little bit better, that's all fine. That shouldn't be a big deal. I think it's really close. So what I'll do is I'll put on these back braces too as well. So these are the back mounts for them, and I'll tack a bolt to them or nut to them, and then bolt them onto the seat, and then just kind of place them where they want to be, get their height right, and then just start welding them in here while the seat's on the car. Just tack them in to figure out where that placement's going to be. Hopefully I can have these seats knocked out today, or at least welded in here today. That'd be really nice. And then I can move on to the shifter. Then once that shifter is in, the interior will really start to come together nicely. All right, so I haven't filmed a whole lot of this, but we're making progress here. I have the seats basically mounted in the car, or at least some pedestals are here. It's a little sloppy, but it's gonna work. There is one issue I noticed with these seats, is that these seat brackets seem to be spaced a little bit differently from from each side. So this bracket over here ended up being a little bit further ahead than the other one did. So it's not a whole lot. It looks like a whole lot more with the seat in the car, but when you're just looking at it like this, it's not as bad as it could have been. I had already mounted these front pedestals in here, and I figured I might as well just keep going with this thing and see how far that goes. It's going to lose me some adjustment in the seats, but do you really need to have that much adjustment anyway? So that's the thought behind that. So I've got the rears in here like this, kind of just on a couple of little pedestals there, and same thing over here on this side, just welded to the side of the car. This one you've already seen, so the front ones are kind of similar, and I think this will hold it. The goal is to just keep the seats from breaking off when you get in, like pulling her out real quick. So the placement is not ideal, but it's better than it was before. I did pull it through this firewall a little bit more, and it looks like this is about where it's going to sit. So I built 2 tabs here to kind of put a little hole there for these things to thread into. Welded some nuts to the back side of that, and that's going to work out all right there. Then over here I ended up doing some sort of stud. It was either put a stud here or weld a nut into the floor, because there just wasn't enough space there for something to thread all the way through. And if I did a nut through the hole, then that could have had a bolt that would have pierced through the floor probably if you went too far with it. So this seemed like the easiest option, so I just welded some bolts into the floor. And honestly, I probably should have done that with the rest of them, because if you look at like the stock seat mount bolts, it's got that there for those two. So that seems to make a lot of sense. So then your carpet pulls through it. You know, we'll see which one's better. We've got both options now, so that's cool. So yeah, so things are coming along pretty well in this. So I'll go ahead and do another test fit, but and then I'll clean this whole thing up, because it is a mess. Like, there is metal shavings everywhere in this thing, and I've got a little air filter going on the fan, and that's working out nicely. Did not realize how much dust and smoke that this stuff creates, that like you could actually see on the fan. You know, like I know that like you get that stuff like in your nose too, and if you're not using a filter. So I've started using a mask now when I do this, and the filter itself is just totally caked in dirt. It used to be just pure white basically, so I know that that's doing some good. So I think that's a good call. But the amount of metal shavings and just dust and dirt in here is pretty bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start cleaning up my little mess here, and see if I can make this look decent. And then from there, I think this will be ready for paint after I do my test fit and just make sure everything looks good. So, all right, so the seats are in. They seem to fit all right. You can see back here, this is kind of what I was talking about, where the seat tracks don't quite line up left to right, but it's not a big issue to me right now. It's not a huge concern. There's still plenty of foot space there, and it's not like they're in the way of anything at all. So I think once the carpet goes in, it's not going to be something that you even notice, or at least that's the hope. This one is still a little tight. It does kind of rub against this thing here, so I might just go ahead and hammer that tunnel out. But this side is looking really good. No issues here at all. And plus you can see that these things, they do slide forward quite a bit, so that's a lot of space up here. And they do go back quite a bit too, so plenty of foot room for me. So I think we're in a pretty good spot with these things. I think we can say mission accomplished. I'm gonna go ahead and just massage this thing out a little bit to see if I can get some more clearance there. And otherwise, I'll just go ahead and start with the paint. So I went and massaged that tunnel, and it did kind of fit, but it was still like really tight. So I'm not using these seat belts anyway, and I couldn't just unbolt it because the bracket is part of the seat mount. So I went ahead and just basically cut the whole thing off. So it's out of the way, and then on the other side, I'll just unbolt it because, you know, we don't need these where we're going. We're going to use the original seat belts just because it matches the ones inside of the car, and though they are older, it'll be fine. So with that finally squared away, these seats were finally mounted in the car. They're all painted. This is looking not too bad, and we're finally ready to move on to the next parts of this project. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.